Mammalian brain, or the limbic brain. Our feelings and emotions are governed here. And finally, on top of that, we have the neocortex, the part of the brain that controls cognition and language. Our rationality resides here between these two parts of the brain. Let me explain why. Our emotions originate here in the limbic brain. Chemicals are released to arouse our awareness of our surroundings. The problem is when we try to translate these sensation feelings into words using our neocortex. For these two different parts of the brain, the communication and translation taking place between them is often inaccurate, and hence leads to our irrationality. Emotions and cognition are not easily translatable. What seems like anger may truly just come from a source of envy. Whereas animals feel fear for a short time, we often dwell on our fears. We make them greater than they are, and we can feel long-term anxiety. We are always feeling certain emotions, and therefore they are always infecting our thinking. Rational people are aware of this. Being able to mitigate your emotions from your thinking helps you make rational decisions. Irrational people are not even aware that their emotions are playing a role in their thinking, often making rash decisions or exploding with rage over menial discomforts. Don't worry though, there are ways we can mitigate our inherently irrational minds. Step 1. Recognize and understand your biases. The most common emotion is the desire for pleasure and the avoidance of pain. This pleasure principle in thinking is the source of all our mental biases. Confirmation bias. Going in search of evidence to support your point of view and turning a blind eye to anything that disconfirms your held belief. Finding evidence that confirms what we want to believe is confirmation bias. Counteract this by also playing devil's advocate and finding opposing views. Conviction bias. How can this idea be wrong if I can have so much energy to defend it? You may even have doubts about the truth of this belief, but now you have dug a hole where you feel the need to defend the idea and convince yourself that it is true. Appearance bias. The halo effect. If someone appears to have a positive quality, we tend to attribute other positive qualities to that person without any evidence. Likewise for negative qualities. Appearances are misleading. The group bias. We love and are relieved when we find other people who think the same way that we do. Isolation and disparity from the group makes us depressed. Groupthink is when people take up ideas solely because they bring us comfort and a sense of belonging to the group. The blame bias. Our innate response is to blame others. It is more painful to look in the mirror and admit our mistakes. This is the blame bias. Superiority bias. We all like to think of ourselves as likable, ethical, and rational. But this can't actually be true, because if it were true, we would all have world peace, and that just isn't the case. Step 2. Beware of inflaming factors. Our minds latch on to emotions and we become reactive. Here are some factors which can inflame your irrationality. Trigger points from early childhood, sudden gains or losses like winning the lottery or losing everything that you have, and then on top of that losing someone that you love in the same month. Rising pressure. Under stress, the primitive parts of our brains kick into action. This is why you see soldiers and people trying to get into the special forces put under such high stress situations. This is because it brings out their true character. Inflaming individuals. Certain individuals in your life can trigger your irrational thinking in positive and negative ways. The group effect. You can get caught up in the collective emotion when surrounded by others. You can see this on display at religious and political gatherings. Step 3. Strategies to bring out the rational self. Here are some strategies to become a more rational person. 1. Understand you are fundamentally irrational and that the emotional being thrives on being ignorant. 2. Examine why you reacted a certain way to a stimulus in your life. 3. Increase your reaction time. Take a step back and remove yourself from a situation. Cool down the emotions and let the rational perspective of the situation arise. 4. Stop trying to change people. Our interactions with others are a major contributor to our emotional chaos. You judge, you see things that you don't like, you want to change people. You get upset, you get frustrated, but it's a losing game. Accept people for what they are and just try to work with what is presented before you. If you want to feel more clarity and calmness in your life, then the first step is to tame your emotions. Law 2, the law of narcissism. Transform self-love into empathy. We are all narcissists, some deeper on the spectrum than others. Humans are social animals, and from the moment we are born, we have a need for attention. People will do almost anything to get attention. This includes crimes, attempted suicides, and hoaxes gone wrong. So where do you fall on the narcissistic spectrum? If you are anywhere below, let's say the middle of the spectrum, you fall into the category of deep narcissism. You are self-righteous, reactive, rageful, and seek vengeance. These are the only ways you know how to mask your insecurities. If the conversation isn't centered around you, you may give a distant stare or become impatient until the conversation is again centered around you. You display high levels of self-confidence, and you use this to gain attention, but it is mainly just to cover up your incomplete sense of self and to fill up an inner emptiness. For you, the deep narcissist, attention is survival. If you're above the midway level on the spectrum, you are a functional narcissist. Most of us fall somewhere here on the spectrum. You like attention if someone gives it to you, however, you are not always seeking attention. You are able to turn your attention outward, listen to others, and not be continually chasing attention from others. A healthy narcissist resides here at the top of the spectrum of self-absorption. At the top of the spectrum lies empathy. This is the complete absorption in others and not yourself. A healthy narcissist can imagine other people's perspectives. You can build relationships more easily, whereas someone in the deep narcissism range tends to slip deeper over time and is unable to maintain and build strong relationships. There are 4 main ways to build your empathetic skill set. Having an empathetic attitude. Don't assume to already understand people. Each new person you meet is like an undiscovered country with new chemistry for you to explore. Visceral empathy. It is hard for humans to figure out others' thoughts, but feelings and mood are much easier to read. Pay attention to the body language and tone of voice of others. Analytic empathy. As Abraham Lincoln once said, "I don't like that man. I must get to know him better." Don't close yourself off from others that rub you up the wrong way, or who you know that you disagree with. The empathetic skill. Becoming more empathetic is a process. In order to understand others better, you need feedback. You can do this by simply asking someone their feelings and thoughts and seeing if you were correct in your assumptions. Empathy is more than anything a state of mind, a different way of relating to others. Types of narcissist. The complete control narcissist. This type of narcissist in general has more ambition and higher energy levels than of an average deep narcissist, as well as higher levels of insecurities. Control narcissists are hypersensitive to any criticism, but they are good listeners, so you need to be extra careful because they can mimic empathy well. They do not do anything with the intention of connecting with people, but rather to control and manipulate them. The theoretical narcissists are masters of disguise. They can play many different roles. They will do anything to seem moral and altruistic, and they love reveling in their status as the victim. Everything they do is for others to see and gain attention from. The healthy narcissist. Healthy narcissists are excellent mood readers and can pick up on body language and tone of voice cues. A healthy narcissist has high levels of optimism and confidence, which they can use to lead a team and boost morale. Law 3. The law of role-playing. See through people's masks. We all wear masks to show ourselves off in the best possible light. Outward-facing pictures on Facebook and Instagram are quite often not the true reality of how someone's life really is. Luckily, our masks have cracks in them that leak out people's true feelings. These leaks can be noticed through non-verbal cues, certain facial expressions, inflection of the voice, or tension in the body. Through body language and tone of voice, which is mostly unconscious, we can better read someone's true feelings beneath the mask. People are like the moon. They only show you one of their sides. Arthur Schopenhauer. If you want to present yourself in the most optimal way and become a master at reading others, practice these 3 skills. Observational skills. 1. When you are having a conversation with someone, pay close attention to micro-expressions. These are split-second expressions such as forced smiles, changes in the tone of voice, or body language which gives mixed signals. 2. Get to know how someone operates in normal situations or at their baseline. Then compare that to how they operate under conditions of stress or excitement. 3. People watch. Take some time to watch how people behave in situations. Take notes and also observe yourself. Remember the cracks in the mask we spoke about earlier? Those flashes of micro-expressions? People can try to prevent these cracks from leaking and showing their true feelings, but that would be futile, as they are for the most part completely unconscious and uncontrollable. In order to see through other people's masks, you need to master the decoding keys. Key 1. Dislike-like cues. Pursing of the lips, sudden squinting of the eyes or the glare, a stiffened neck, feet that turn away from you as you engage in conversation, folding of the arms, and excess tension in the body are all clues. If someone gives you a compliment or praises you without their eyes lighting up, this could be a clue of hidden envy. Learn to distinguish between a fake and genuine smile. Genuine smiles move the eyes, eyebrows, and cheeks upward. Dominance and submission. People who feel dominant tend to talk more in conversations and interrupt regularly. It is fairly easy to meet a couple and notice which one is the dominant one in the relationship. The dominant partner may seem to only half listen to their partner in a group conversation and will make eye contact with others in the group, but not their partner as often. Deception cues. People who are trying to hide something become more chatty and animated. Gestures with the hands and arms can become more exaggerated. If you perceive that someone is trying to deceive you, let them continue to talk as much as they can, and when the time is right, hit them with a pointed question and see what kind of micro-expressions your question creates within them. The art of impression management. In order to perform optimally in social situations, you can do the following. Be aware of your nonverbal cues like body language and tone of voice. Give genuine smiles and use welcoming body language. Make sure you create the right first impression. Selectively make yourself absent and create an air of mystery. Make your behavior less predictable and project saintly qualities like sincerity and honesty. Law 4. The law of compulsive behavior. Determine the strength of people's character. Our characters are formed in early childhood and by our daily habits. You can measure the strength of someone's character by how well they handle adversity, their ability to work with others, their patience, and their ability to learn. Character is destiny. Heraclitus. The word character comes from ancient Greek and was used for an engraving instrument. Our characters are stamped within us. Spirits and gods do not control us. Our character does. It is impossible to remove your character, but it is possible to lessen or stop negative patterns in your life. You need to first understand your own character and then learn to value character above all else when choosing a partner to work with or an intimate partner. Character should be placed above intelligence, beauty, and reputation. Actions repeated over time is the main indicator of someone's character. People with strong character do not give up easily, are persistent, and are open to new ideas. People with weak character, on the other hand, are overwhelmed easily, difficult to rely upon, not open to learn from others because needing to learn from others would imply criticism or shortcomings. The most significant indicator of people's character comes through their actions over time. Toxic characters. You need to first identify and then steer clear of people with these toxic characteristics. The hyper-perfectionist. Someone who may seem dedicated, but is unable to delegate and must control every situation. In other words, a control freak. The relentless rebel. Someone who hates authority and mistrusts anyone in power. They cannot accept any criticism and are often childish in their behavior. The personalizer. Someone who is very sensitive and thoughtful. However, that sensitivity only goes one way, which is inward. They take everything personally. Avoid these people because they will try to make you feel guilty for something you said or did that spurred their sensitivity. The drama magnet. Someone whose only way to get attention is by surrounding themselves with drama and problems. They always find a way to become a victim in any given situation. The big talker. Someone who is always talking a big game, but never actually finishes anything they have started. They will inevitably just waste your time. The sexualizer. Someone with an abundance of sexual energy. This usually comes from a dark place, and they tend to see every relationship as a possible path to something sexual. The pampered prince or princess. Someone who is overindulged and given too much attention by their parents at a young age. If they don't get what they want, they can show baby-like behavior to an extreme of even throwing tantrums. The moralizer. Someone who condemns something, but secretly is drawn to that thing. They seem moral, but they have a secret dark side. Law 5. The law of covetousness. Become an elusive object of desire. We are marked by the continual desire to possess what we do not have, the object projected by our fantasies. It is human nature to desire things we don't have. And once we have finally obtained that desire, we are already distracted and looking for something better. Most often, this is referred to as the grass is always greener syndrome. Nowadays, people see vulnerability and being forthright as a path to truth and honesty. Letting people know all your likes, dislikes, fears, and loves, and believing that people should just love you and desire you for who you are. In actuality, what people really want is for their fantasies to be stimulated. But if you become too familiar, there is no mystery and no room for imagination. People's interest in you will be paper thin. Do not follow the moralism of the times, which urges honesty at the expense of desirability. Here are 3 strategies for stimulating desire. 1. Know when and how to withdraw. Be a little cold, don't be needy, and never be too obvious with your opinions, feelings, values, and tastes. You want to allow for others to create their own picture of you in their imagination. Know when to withdraw, maybe for a day, maybe for a week. Create some sense of mystery around yourself. 2. Create rivalries of desire. What we want almost always reflects what others want. The man who has been single for 5 years gets into a relationship and all of a sudden has 2 other women interested in him. Or the child who wants his brother's new toy. Creating the impression that you or your work are desired by others will attract others. In negotiation tactics, always have another party that is also interested to create a rivalry. 3. Use induction. Associate yourself with something slightly illicit, unconventional, or defiant. Almost all people desire voyeurism, which is seeing inside the private lives of others. Give others the impression that you are sharing secrets that shouldn't be known and may create some outrage, but a lot of curiosity. The secrets need to be new and exotic. And finally, dangle something in front of people that is just out of their reach. The offer of a fast path to riches or the fountain of youth. Remember that possession does not compel people to act. Desire does. Focus your attention on looking inward, finding what you truly desire, and then following those desires. Don't become distracted by what everyone else is chasing or trying to influence.
Come on, man, really? I'm not really trying to play a boy like this.
You to follow. Your time in life is limited. Law 6, the law of short-sightedness. Elevate your perspective. Humans are most impressed by what they can see and hear now in the present. By overemphasizing the present, we lose perspective over our long-term goals. When you are standing at the base of the mountain, you are unable to have much perspective over the bigger picture. As you go higher up the mountain, you can see more clearly. When you reach the top of the mountain, you have a panoramic view that is much clearer than the one that you had when you were standing at the base of the mountain. People who are stuck in the present are the people standing at the base of the mountain. People who are reactive to the present events are most susceptible to manipulation and other alluring get-rich-quick schemes. With an elevated perspective, you will have the patience and clarity to reach almost any objective. Instead of reacting to everything that is in front of you, you need to train your far-sighted perspective or your bigger picture. And you can do this by detaching yourself from the heat of the moment, calming down your emotions of fear or excitement, analyzing all the negative consequences of taking that action, focusing on the long-term goals, and asking yourself if taking action is in alignment with that vision. Distancing yourself from the present will allow you to gain a wider perspective and look further into the future. You should also avoid prolonged contact with people who are narrow-sighted. These people are like the people standing at the base of the mountain without any long-term perspective and are in a perpetually reactive mode. There are 4 signs of short-sightedness that you need to be aware of and overcome. 1, unintended consequences. Life is complex. You are naive to think that A will lead to B, then B will lead to C. Events and other people with their own motivations will come into contact with your plans and your long-term goals. And these things are wholly out of your control. However, by first going through all the possible negative consequences of taking an action, you are at least aware of ways in which your plans could deviate. Think deeply. Go as far as your mind can go in all permutations or chain reactions of decisions. That new TV that you saw on sale seems like a good bargain in the heat of the moment. But what chain reactions will that purchase cause? After all, now you need to get your money's worth, right? So what's that going to mean? One hour a day of Netflix and the news, which maybe turns into 4 hours a day. And, before you know it, over the span of a month, that is approximately 120 hours in front of a TV. Or if you extrapolate that out over a year, that's 1,460 hours. And over the next 5 years, 7,300 hours of your life. Was the TV on sale worth 7,300 hours of your life? 2, tactical hell. When you find yourself in arguments on all fronts just to protect your ego or win the argument, you have probably lost sight of your long-term goals and vision. Now would be the time to ask yourself, what are my real values and priorities? Then focus your time and energy away from useless arguments and towards your long-term goals. Does winning the argument or protecting your ego help you to achieve those goals? Most probably not. 3, ticker tape fever. Nowadays, we all have become addicted to the continuous news cycles and pings and dings of social media. If you are reacting to and following all of these updates to guide your decisions, then you have the fever, and you need to refocus your energy towards your long-term vision. Focusing more on your long-term outcomes needs patience, but it will reward you with calmness and clarity. 4, lost in trivia. It is easy to drown in a sea of information nowadays, especially when you are actively trying to have all the details. To prevent this feeling of information overload and the perpetual chasing of every minuscule detail, remind yourself that you don't have to have all the details. With a solid vision and long-term goals, you can weed out the essentials from the non-essentials, and it is wise to delegate and let subordinates do the rest of the information gathering for you. You can steer the ship, but you don't also need to be below the decks, manning the oars. Become a far-sighted human. Detach from the now, calm your emotions in the present, and get yourself to a higher point on the mountain to widen your perspective and see all the future consequences of the decisions that you make now. Law 7, the law of defensiveness. Soften people's resistance by confirming their self-opinion. Everybody wants to believe that they are independent and in control of their own lives. People all have certain self-opinions and perceptions about who they are, and they are willing to fight to defend those opinions. There are 3 universal qualities to people's self-opinions. 1, I am autonomous, acting of my own free will. Even if we have been manipulated or succumbed to peer pressure, we don't want to tell ourselves that outside influences guided our decision-making. If we feel like we are being coerced, we tend to rebel. 2, I am intelligent in my own way. No one feels comfortable with the idea that they may be gullible or have subpar intelligence. 3, I am basically good and decent. We all have the tendency to believe we are good people supporting the right causes. By understanding the 3 universal self-opinions above, you are in a better position to influence them. Never put someone in a situation that would trigger one of their self-opinions. You can use these 5 strategies to persuade people effectively and avoid triggering their defensiveness of the 3 universal self-opinions. 1, transform yourself into a deep listener. Our attention is often scattered, and the reason for this is that people are more interested in their own thoughts and feelings than the person they are communicating with. The usual advice of talking less and listening more is often redundant unless there is some kind of motivation to actually listen. Treat each person you interact with as an uncharted country that is abundant with hidden surprises. Find what interests them, look for clues in their facial expressions, like when their eyes light up, and probe deeper. The more they talk, the more you can discover their desires and insecurities. 2, infect people with the proper mood. People are very vulnerable to the moods of others. If you are relaxed and warm-hearted, they will feel comfortable, sense this, and mirror your good mood. Gentle taps on the arms can build rapport, but avoid too much eye contact because this can be taken as a sexual connotation. 3, confirm their self-opinion using the 3 universal self-opinions. For independence, appeal to the sense of autonomy. If you need to get their help, don't let them feel like they are being manipulated. Instead, position the favor in a way that makes the favor feel like it was their idea or choice all along. For intelligence, concede that their opinion on the matter is better than yours. This will make them feel slightly superior, lower their guards, and put them in a position where they are more willing to accept your opinions later. For their self-belief of decency and goodness, link your need to a greater cause and remind them of good deeds that they have done in the past. 4, ally their insecurities. Once you have identified someone's insecurities, be careful not to trigger them, and then go about giving compliments and flattering them about those qualities. 5, use people's resistance and stubbornness. Subvert people's emotions, language, and stubbornness in a constructive way. Use the language back at them, because it is very hard for people to not follow the words that they have used themselves. Stubbornness stems from uncertainty and fear of change. If they have a rebellious nature, reverse psychology can be used to push them in a direction you want them to go. The royal road to influence is to put the focus on others. Let them do the talking. Let them be the stars of the show. The flexible mind. Just as the body tightens with age, however, so does the mind. When we are children, our minds are very flexible, and they learn at a rate much faster than as adults. The ultimate frame of mind is one that is flexible like a child's and has the reasoning power of an adult. As we age, we become closed off to new ideas. Try to imagine your ideas and opinions like toy building blocks. You can play with them, experiment with them, throw some out, keep some, or get new ones. Don't become too attached and rigid to your ideas. Remain playful and flexible in your spirit. Finally, become more self-aware that you are not as good as your self-opinion makes you believe you are. You do buy services or products due to advertising influences. You do conform to ideas because of the groups that you belong to, and you are susceptible to being manipulated. Distance yourself from your self-opinion to see how it affects your thinking. Law 8, the law of self-sabotage. Change your circumstances by changing your attitude. You must not only be aware of the role of your attitude, but also believe in its supreme power to alter your circumstances. The way that you look at and interpret the world around you is what creates your attitude. If you see the negative in all situations and you are fearful, you will inadvertently create those situations that you fear the most. If you are afraid of failure, you won't try new things, which results ultimately in a failure to succeed in anything. There are 2 general categories of attitude: negative and narrow, or positive and expansive. Negative and narrow-minded people are generally fearful, and in order to try and have control, they limit what they see and experience. Someone with a positive and expansive attitude, on the other hand, wants to try new things and is open to new ideas. If you want to change your circumstances in life, you first need to change your attitude. Here are 5 constricted or negative attitudes that you need to conquer. Hostile attitude. The world is a hostile place, so in order to try and defend themselves, people with a hostile attitude seek to become hostile themselves. In their mind, the world is against them. They blame others and tend to make others around them aggressive or defensive. Be aware of this type of attitude and manage your own hostility by telling yourself when you first meet someone, "I like this person," or "this person is intelligent." If you notice less hostility in the world and in others when you begin doing that, then you may notice that the source of the hostility was actually manifesting from within yourself. Anxious attitude. Someone with an anxious attitude ultimately fears losing control of the situation. They like to micromanage and control others. You can deal with your own anxiety by channeling this negative energy into your work and trying to become less of a perfectionist and control freak. If you are dealing with someone with this type of attitude, don't let their attitude infect you. Be calm and become a soothing influence on them. Avoidant attitude. Someone with doubts about their intelligence or competence and who generally see the world through the lens of their insecurities have this type of attitude. They avoid responsibility or challenges because they may call into action their self-esteem. Be cautious to form partnerships with someone like this. And if you feel that you may have some of this attitude yourself, you can diminish this fear by motivating yourself to take on small projects and make sure that you take them all the way to completion. Depressive attitude. This attitude carries a feeling of unworthiness and being unloved. A person with this type of attitude tends to betray, criticize, and wound others to feed their own depression. Any signs of success or progress are self-sabotage before they can even fully be accomplished. People are attracted to someone with this kind of attitude because they want to help them. However, this usually results in them also being criticized and then discarded. Never try to cheer someone up with this type of attitude by showering them with the wonders of life. Instead, subtly steer them towards positive experiences. We all have depressive moments in our lives. When you find yourself in a depressed state, it is best to channel that energy into your work or the arts. You can pick up a guitar, paint a picture, or something like this. Resentful attitude. They feel wronged and see oppressors everywhere around them. People who have more than them are a sign of injustice, and any sign of criticism or disrespect towards them is taken very seriously. They do not explode in anger. However, they prefer to stew on their emotions. People with this attitude hold on to grudges, and if given any power, use it to express their resentment in often vengeful and vicious ways. Avoid people with this attitude if at all possible. If you harbor resentful tendencies yourself, learn to let go of grudges. It is better to explode with rage in the moment than to stew on negative emotions that you may have just made up in your head. The expansive, positive attitude. Be an idea explorer. Leave certainty behind and play with new ideas. Enjoy challenging yourself with new ways of thinking. Adversity and pain are most often out of your control, but you can learn how to control your response and emotions to any situation. Don't accept and place limits on yourself as you grow older. If you believe that you can't do something, you will create a self-fulfilling cycle. Your attitude plays a huge role on your health. Falling in love or getting excited about your job gives you more energy and allows you to recover from illnesses faster. Being depressed or stressed, on the other hand, does the reverse. Don't take things that others say or do towards you personally. They are just protecting their own negative feelings. Law 9, the law of repression. Confront your dark side. More often than not, people are not who they seem to be. We all have a dark side. The selfish, aggressive impulses within us that we hide from the public view to fit in and feel respected and liked by the group. Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, refers to this as the shadow. The shadow lives within our unconscious mind, but can leak out through our emotions in times of insecurity or stress. Our dark side also tends to reveal itself more as we get older. Here are some notable signs of the dark side. Contradictory behavior. A person who preaches the rules but then breaks them. Emotional outbursts. Person who loses self-control easily. Vehement denial. For example, a person who argues against homosexuality but secretly desires it. Over-idealization. A person who uses a good cause to act in a bad manner. Accidental behavior. A person who gets drunk and reveals their true emotions. Projection. A person who accuses someone else of desiring sex, money, or power, when in fact that is what they secretly desire themselves. order to conceal the shadow, we develop emphatic traits. These traits tend to cover up the opposite trait that we want hidden from the public view. Here are the 7 most common emphatic traits. The tough guy shows an intimidating side to cover up the soft and vulnerable side they are so afraid of. The saint exudes purity and goodness, but once given a taste of power, quickly abuses that power. The fanatic impresses people with their drive and dedication, but fail to deliver on what they promise. The passive-aggressive charmer will be overly nice on initial interactions, but gossips behind the backs of others. The rigid rationalist fears irrationality. They use their intellect to bully others that they deem to have primitive or low-level thinking. The snob is so afraid of mediocrity that they exert superiority. The extreme entrepreneur pays exceptional attention to detail and seems to value independence. Their inability to listen and delegate work to others end up becoming their downfall. They secretly want others to take care of them. When you become conscious of the shadow and bring it out into the light, it loses its power. You can then control, channel, and integrate it into your life. By doing so, your more attractive, authentic, and creative side will come back to life. You can follow these steps to become an integrated human. See the shadow. Identify and monitor what things make you touchy and insecure. What is causing your shadow to show, and what are you trying to hide? Embrace the shadow. Don't repress or ignore your shadow. It is part of your personality. Explore the shadow. Explore your dark impulses and animalistic nature. If your shadow surfaces in dream states or dark thoughts, don't try to ignore it. Play with the ideas and channel that energy into your work. Show the shadow. Use the shadow as your ally if people get in your way. Respect your own opinions more and others less. Be more assertive and compromise less. Care less about what people think of you. And finally, don't be afraid to use the shadow at times to offend and even hurt people that have bad intentions or unjustly criticize you. Show your shadow proudly. The more you repress the shadow, the darker and uglier it becomes. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. Let me know in the comments below which law you found the most helpful. And if you guys don't want to miss out on more videos like this one in the future,
most remarkable tool for connecting to people and attaining social power. This tool is empathy. When cultivated and properly used, it can allow us to see into the moods and minds of others, giving us the power to anticipate people's actions and gently lower their resistance. This instrument, however, is blunted by our habitual self absorption. It is quite wise to understand that we are all narcissists, some deeper on the spectrum than the others. It is therefore our mission in life to come to terms with this self love and learn how to turn our sensitivity outward, towards others instead of inward. We must recognize at the same time the toxic narcissists among us before getting enmeshed in their dramas and poisoned by their envy. In our early childhood, we are dependent on others for attention, validation, and love. But later on, we realize that these sources are not that reliable. Our emotional needs often remain unmet, and so we learn to develop an inner sense of self. This is a positive self image of ourselves that we create in our mind. In this image, we make our positive attributes prominent and explain away our flaws. This helps us develop positive self love and validates us from within. We can resort to it at any point, especially when we are alone. It is very reliable, so much so that it becomes unconscious and we barely notice it. Unfortunately, some people never learn to develop this inner sense of self. They remain dependent on others for all the attention and validation. The reason of this is often a sharp break in their early stages of development. Perhaps their parents were abusive or were themselves too self absorbed to acknowledge the child. Or maybe they were too much caring, which conditioned that child to remain dependent on others for all their emotional needs and their sense of self, even in adulthood. These people rank high on the narcissism scale. They tend to see others as extensions of themselves, also called as self objects. People exist as instruments for attention and validation. Their desire is to control them like they control their own arm or leg. In a relationship, they will slowly make the partner cut off contact with friends. Empathy is more than anything a state of mind. The greatest danger you face is your general assumption that you really understand people and that you can quickly judge and categorize them. Instead, you must begin with the assumption that you are ignorant and that you have natural biases that will make you judge people incorrectly. Empathy is an instrument of emotional attunement. It is hard for us to read or figure out the thoughts of another person, but feelings and moods are much easier for us to pick up. We are all prone to catching the emotions of another person. The reason you are able to understand your friends or partner so deeply is that you have a lot of information about their tastes, values, and family background. We all have had the experience of thinking we know someone, but over time having to adjust our original impression once we get more information. So, while physical empathy is extremely powerful, it must be supplemented by analytical empathy. Becoming empathetic, like anything, involves a process. In order to make sure that you are really making progress and improving your ability to understand people on a deeper level, get direct and indirect feedback from others. You can directly ask them about their moods or learn more about their life. People tend to wear the mask that shows them off in the best possible light and hides their insecurities. They want to be seen as humble, confident, and diligent. They say the right things, smile, and seem interested in our ideas. They learn to conceal their insecurities and envy. If we take this appearance for reality, we never really get to know their true feelings, and on occasion we become shocked at their sudden resistance, hostility, and manipulative actions. Fortunately, the mask has cracks in it. People continually leak out their true feelings and unconscious desires in the nonverbal cues that they cannot completely control. For example, their facial expressions and tension in the body. You must master this language by transforming yourself into a superior reader of men and women. Armed with this knowledge, you can take proper defensive measures when necessary. And most importantly, you can effectively help and take care of the people you love. Milton Erickson was a pioneer in hypnotherapy and one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century. One day he woke up at age 17 to find certain parts of his body paralyzed. A few days later, he was diagnosed with polio and was unable to move any part of his body except his eyeballs. While being in that state, he discovered something phenomenal. His senses heightened and he could notice unusual cues when he saw his sisters talking or playing with each other. He would notice their body language, the way they talked, the way they made requests to each other, and so on. He was able to see their deep desires and intentions by focusing deeply on their nonverbal communication. In a similar way, he learned to walk again by focusing on a particular muscle in his leg. Wanting to explore this thing further, he decided to pursue a career in psychology. For Milton, his sudden paralysis opened his eyes to not only a different form of communication, but also a completely different way of relating to people. What he discovered is that nonverbal communication cannot be experienced simply through thinking and translating thoughts into words, but must be felt physically as one engages with the facial expressions or locked positions of other people. It is a different form of knowledge, one that connects with the animal part of our nature. Remember that people are generally trying to present the best possible front to the world. They will use words to hide their feelings and distract you from the reality. They'll also use certain facial expressions that are easy to put on and that people assume mean friendliness. Your task is to look past the distractions and become more aware of these signs that leak out automatically, revealing something of the true emotion beneath the mask. When choosing people to work and associate with, don't be mesmerized by their reputation or taken in by the surface image they try to project. Instead, train yourself to look deep within them and see their character. People's character is formed in their earliest years and by their daily habits. It is what compels them to repeat certain actions in their lives and fall into negative patterns. Look closely at such patterns and keep in mind that people never do something just once. They will inevitably repeat their behavior. Gauge the relative strength of their character by how well they handle adversity, their ability to adapt and work with other people, and their patience and ability to learn. Always gravitate towards those who display signs of a strong character, and avoid the many toxic types out there. Know thoroughly your own character so you can break your compulsive patterns and take control of your destiny. Howard Hughes was an American businessman who inherited a fortune from his parents when they died in his teenage years. The fortune included a tool company that was later turned into an aircraft manufacturing company. In his early years, Hughes was raised up in an overprotective and controlling environment. His every action was monitored and decisions made by his parents. This made Hughes resentful of the lack of control and freedom in his life. After the death of his parents, the nice and obedient Hughes suddenly turned into a rebellious control freak. His repressed desire for control had come out and created a pattern for the rest of his life. He would win people over by his charm. People would assume him to be a very successful businessman due to the company he inherited. But they were not able to judge his character, which only revealed over time when it was too late. Hughes ruined his business ventures and even his health because of his extreme control and inability to delegate and manage people. His patterns ruined his destiny. The thing about patterns is that they repeat themselves and thus shape our character, which in turn determines our destiny. The most significant indicator of people's character comes through their actions over time. Despite what people say about the lessons they have learned and how they have changed over the years, you will inevitably notice the same actions and decisions repeating in the course of their life. The second most important indicator of someone's character is how they act under pressure. A person with a strong character has clear values and is unwilling to compromise on them. They show resilience and persistence under pressure. The person with a weak character, on the other hand, gives up. Similarly, how people handle power and responsibility will tell you a lot about them. As Abraham Lincoln said, if you want to test a man's character, give him power. To succeed in life, you must play to your strengths. But unfortunately, most people let their ego come in the way of their success. They try to improve their innate weaknesses, and so they end up wasting a lot of time and energy. People with superior character understand their limitations. They know that there is both good and bad to every human being, and so they work on improving their strengths and increase their awareness about their own patterns. Keep in mind that most people will keep repeating their patterns throughout their life, making it easier for you to understand their character by focusing on these patterns. Similarly, understand your own patterns to play to your strengths. By nature, we humans are not easily contented with our circumstances. By some perverted force within us, the moment we possess something or get what we want, our minds begin to drift towards something new and different. We imagine that we can have it better. The more distant and unattainable this new object, the greater is our desire to have it. We can call this the grass is always greener syndrome. It is like an optical illusion. If we get too close to the grass, which means to that new object, we see that it is not exactly as we expected. Its mystery wears off. Closer to home, we can see this syndrome at work in our daily lives. We continually look at other people who seem to have it better than us. We may be in a perfectly satisfying relationship, but our minds often drift toward a new person, someone who doesn't have the very real flaws of our partner, or so we think. We dream of being taken out of our boring life by traveling to some new culture that is exotic and where people are just happier than in the grimy city where we live. In all these cases, if we get closer to the people we envy, that supposed happy family or that utopia, we would see through the illusion. And often, when we act on these desires, we soon become disappointed at their reality. But it doesn't change our behavior. We still want the next object glittering in the distance. And so, the next exotic cult or get rich quick scheme will inevitably seduce us. You can explain this human nature to your advantage by creating some mystery, which I will explain soon. Anyways, this syndrome can be explained by three qualities of the human brain. The first is known as induction. This is how something positive generates a contrasting negative image in our mind. This is most obvious in our visual system. When we see some color, for example black, it tends to intensify our perception of the opposite color around us, which in this case would be white. In general, the mind operates by contrast. It is necessary as we formulate concepts about something by becoming aware of its opposite. What this means is that whenever we see or imagine something, our minds cannot help but see or imagine the opposite. If we are forbidden by our culture to think a particular thought or entertain a particular desire, that taboo instantly brings to the mind the very thing that we are forbidden. Every no sparks a corresponding yes. If our early ancestors had been prone to feeling content with their circumstances, they would not have been sensitive enough to possible dangers that lurked in the most apparently safe environments. We survived and thrived through our continual conscious alertness, which predisposed us to thinking and imagining the possible negative in any circumstance. We are inclined, therefore, toward a continual negative bias. What is real and what is imagined are both experienced almost similarly in the brain. This has been demonstrated through various experiments in which subjects who imagine something produce electrical and chemical activity in their brains that is remarkably similar to when they actually live out what they are imagining. What this means is that our imagination is essentially limitless, and what we imagine has almost the force of what we actually experience. And so we become creatures who are continually prone to imagining something better than the present circumstances, and feeling some pleasure in the release from reality that our imagination brings us. You see yourself in a special way, but to other people, you are just a person among others. And as a person, you inspire either curiosity and excitement or indifference. At worst, you may inspire hostility. Keep in mind that people project onto you their own fantasies and preconceptions. By understanding and taking control of other people's perceptions, you or your work can become more desirable. The following are the three main strategies for becoming more desirable. Know how and when to withdraw. Things are mostly judged by their appearances, and too much exposure makes you look common and makes other people get tired of you. Learn to create some mystery, be cold and unavailable sometimes so that you won't be taken for granted. Create rivalries of desire. When one person desires something, other people start desiring it as well. That's how trends are created. For us humans, competing for someone's attention is quite common. Use this to your advantage. Use induction. Associate yourself to some degree with the unconventional. Your goal is to stand out of the crowd. By standing out and differentiating yourself from others, you automatically become desirable. It is in the animal part of our nature to be most impressed by what we can see and hear in the present, or whatever seems the most dramatic. This is what makes us fall for alluring schemes that promise quick results or easy money. And it is the exact same thing that makes us overreact to present circumstances. We become overly exhilarated or panicky as events turn one direction or the other. You should measure people by the narrowness or breadth of their vision. Avoid entangling yourself with those who cannot see the consequences of their actions. These people are in a continual reactive mode, and they will infect you with this energy as well. Your eyes must be on the larger trends that govern events and which are not immediately visible. Never lose sight of your long term goals. With an elevated perspective, you will have the patience and clarity to reach almost any objective. Every event is connected to something that happened before in an endless chain of historical happenings. Any present problem has deep roots in the past, and it also encompasses the future. Whatever we do has consequences that stretch far into the years to come. When we limit our thinking to what our senses immediately provide, we are no longer aware of why or how things come about. We imagine that some successful scheme that has lasted a few months can only get better. We react to what is given in the moment based on only a small piece of the big puzzle. The result of all this is that our actions lead to unintended consequences, or even to disasters like the South Sea crash or the recent crash of 2008. There is, in fact, a way for us humans to give ourselves an expanded view in the present moment. We can call this the far sighted perspective. First, when facing a problem, conflict, or some exciting opportunity, we train ourselves to detach from the heat of the moment. We work to calm down our excitement or our fear and get some distance. Next, we start to make our perspective deep and wide. In considering the nature of the problem we are confronting, we don't just grab for an immediate explanation, but instead we dig deeper and consider other possibilities and possible motivations for the people involved. We force ourselves to look at the overall context of the event, not just what immediately grabs our attention. We focus on our long term goals and realign our priorities in the present according to them. In simple words, this process involves a distance from the present, a deeper look at the source of problems, a wider perspective on the overall context of the situation, and a look further into the future, which obviously includes the consequences of our actions and our own long term priorities. As with most elements of human nature, awareness is the key. Only by seeing the signs of short sightedness in ourselves we can combat them. The following are the four most common manifestations of short term thinking. Unintended consequences. In the 19th century India, which was under the British rule, there were too many venomous cobras in the streets of Delhi. The authorities announced that for every killed cobra brought to them, a reward will be given. Soon after this, the locals started to breed cobras in order to make a living. And by the time the government cancelled its program, there were three times more cobras than before. Any phenomenon in the world is by nature complex. An action sets off a limitless chain of reactions. It is never as simple as event A leading to event B. The event B will further lead to event C, then to D, and beyond. You cannot possibly map out these chain of events or get complete control over consequences. But by making your thinking more consequential, you can at least become aware of the more obvious negative consequences that could ensue. And this often spells the difference between success and disaster. Our minds are designed for strategic thinking and calculating several moves in advance towards our goals. But in tactical hell, you can never raise your perspective high enough to think in that manner. That is because you're constantly reacting to the moves of another person and not being proactive. Embroiled in their dramas and emotions, you keep going around in circles. The only solution is to sacrifice your ego and back down. Remind yourself that winning an argument or proving your point gets you nowhere in the long run. Win through your actions, not your words. During the run up to the 1929 crash on Wall Street, many people had become addicted to playing the stock market, and this addiction had a physical component, which was the sound of the ticker tape that registered each change in a stock's price. Hearing that clicking noise indicated something was happening. Somebody was trading and making a fortune. Many felt drawn to the sound itself, which felt like the heartbeat of Wall Street. We no longer have the ticker tape, but many of us have become addicted to the minute by minute news cycle, to the latest trends. We feel like we are connected to the very flow of life itself, to events as they change in real time, and to other people who are following the same instant reports. It is normal to want to keep up with the latest news, but to base any kind of decision on these snapshots of the moment is to run the risk of misreading the larger picture. You feel the need to be on top of all the details and global trends so that you can control things better, but you are drowning in information. This is a sure sign that you have lost a sense of your priorities. Make yourself aware of which facts are more important, what problems or details require more attention. Like everyone, you enjoy the present and its passing pleasures. Instead of becoming a monk, you connect to the trends of the moment and to the current flow of life. But you derive even greater pleasure from reaching your long term goals and overcoming adversity. This will enable you to see further into the future, a potential power that we humans have only begun to tap into. No single human being would want to be controlled or manipulated by someone else. We all like to think that we are free, and the choices we make are not made by compulsion but from our own free will. What this means is that to master persuasion and influence, we must work on other people's emotions, rather than making direct requests or using force, which only makes others resentful of us. But the real question is, how do we do that? The answer to this question might be the opposite way that you would like to imagine. People have a perception about themselves. We can call this perception their self opinion. This self opinion can be accurate or not, it doesn't matter. What matters is how people perceive their own worthiness and how they judge their own character. There are three qualities to people's self opinions that are nearly universal. These are as follows: I am autonomous, acting of my own free will. I am intelligent in my own way. And I am basically good and decent. These three are some of the quite common self opinions that people generally have. But there are also a wide variety of other self opinions that people can have. To influence other people and soften up their resistance, you must start by confirming their self opinion. An important thing to remember is that just like people with a high self opinion, there are also people with a low self opinion. They believe that they don't deserve anything good or how unfair life is. When dealing with such people, you do not try to lift them up. This will clash with their belief that the world is against them and that they really do not deserve such good things. They will discount your ideas and resist you. Instead, you must work from within their self opinion, empathizing with the injustices in their life and the difficulties that they have faced. Normally, we try to charm people with our own ideas. We try to show ourselves in the best light and hype our past accomplishments. We ask for favors and promise great things about ourselves. But the danger we do not realize is that we are putting all of the attention on ourselves. In a world where people are increasingly self absorbed and defensive, this only makes others turn more inward in return and think more of their own interests rather than ours. What is so annoying is that even after they refuse to give us what we want, we still continually keep butting up their resistance, trying harder and harder to convince them, only to our dismay. The royal road to influence and power is to go the opposite direction. Put the focus on others, let them do the talking, and let them be the stars of the show. You listen to them as they share their ideas and wisdom, and you give them sincere appreciation. Humans love it when they find out that someone shares their values and deeply held beliefs. Nothing comes off as satisfying as this. This kind of attention is quite rare in the world, and people are so hungry for it that giving them such validation will lower their defenses and open their minds to whatever ideas you want to insinuate. Even after you have confirmed their self opinion, it is still wise not to make any direct requests. They may think you are a flatterer. Instead, you should convey your desire indirectly by your or somebody else's words and actions. This way, not only it will appear more real, but it will also validate them further because it will give them a chance to help you on their own, thus enabling them to exercise their free will while you get what you want. How we see the world affects everything in our lives. It affects our finances, our relationship, our happiness, and so much more. The reason our perceptions influence our lives so much is because they shape our attitude, and our attitude decides our life. You can change your life for good by mastering your perceptions, and in turn, your attitude. Imagine the following scenario. A young American has to spend a year studying in Paris. He is somewhat timid and cautious and is prone to feelings of depression and low self esteem. But he's genuinely excited by this opportunity. Once there, he finds it hard to speak the language. The mistakes he makes and the slightly derisory attitude of the Parisians make it even harder for him to learn. He finds the people there not friendly at all. The weather is damp and gloomy, the food is too rich. Although he has pleasurable moments, he generally feels alienated and unhappy. He concludes that Paris is overrated and a rather unpleasant place. Now imagine the same scenario but with a young woman who is more extroverted and has an adventurous spirit. She is not bothered by making mistakes in French, nor by the occasional snide remark from a Parisian. She finds learning the language a pleasant challenge. Others find her spirit engaging, Because of all this, she makes friends more easily, and with more contacts, her knowledge of French improves. She finds the weather romantic and quite suitable to the place. To her, the city represents endless adventures and she finds it enchanting. The conclusion to these stories is that each of us has a particular way of interpreting events and actions of people around us. This determines so much of what happens to us in life. If our attitude is essentially fearful, we see the negative in every circumstance. We stop ourselves from taking chances. We blame others for mistakes and fail to learn from them. Similarly, if we feel hostile or suspicious, we make others feel the same emotions in our presence. We sabotage our career and relationships by unconsciously creating those circumstances that we fear the most. The good news, however, is that the human attitude is malleable. By making our attitude more positive, open, and tolerant of other people, we can spark a different dynamic. We can learn from adversity, create opportunities out of nothing, and draw people to us. To achieve this, we must first change the way we perceive things, and we also must explore the limits of our willpower and how far it can take us. Almost all of us carry hurts and traumas from past experiences or from our childhood, but the ways in which we deal with these hurts and traumas are not the same. Some people develop a destructive attitude because of these hurts, while others choose to perceive their traumas as a chance to learn and grow. Instead of reacting to your hurts at face value, which might be the path of least resistance, learn to dive deep into your guts and explore their underlying roots. This way, you will be able to better understand them and see them as opportunities to improve and create success. Your attitude will change and you will be more in control. That is ultimate freedom. Having a positive attitude means expanding your vision and focusing on the underlying causes of problems in order to solve them. To change your perception, consider the following aspects of your life. How to view the world. See yourself as an explorer. With the gift of consciousness, you stand before a vast and unknown universe that we humans have just begun to investigate. As an explorer, you leave all certainty behind you, and your quest is always for new ideas and new ways of thinking. How to view adversity. Traumas always have valuable lessons to teach, and overcoming obstacles makes us stronger. Therefore, you should always look deeply into your traumas to get a better understanding of why they happen, instead of getting emotional or resentful. Although adversity and pain are generally beyond your control, you still have the power to determine your response and the fate that comes from that. How to view yourself. Whatever you are doing now, you are in fact capable of much more, and by thinking that, you will create a very different dynamic. In ancient times, many great leaders such as Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar felt that they were descendants from gods and are partly divine. Such self belief would translate into high levels of confidence that others would feed off and recognize. It became a self fulfilling prophecy. You don't necessarily need to indulge in such grandiose thoughts, but feeling that you are destined for something great or important will give you a degree of resilience when people oppose or resist you. You will not internalize the doubts that come from such moments and will have an enterprising spirit. You will continually try new things and take risks. We came into this world bursting with energy and intensity, and we did not understand the difference between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. We only experienced natural impulses, and some of these impulses were aggressive, but we simply did not care about them at that time. Whatever emotion we felt, whether positive or negative, was expressed directly and openly without any barrier. We could be openly selfish, rude, or even manipulative to get things our way. But as we got older, pressures to present a particular acceptable front came from many directions, which included our parents, teachers, and peers. As a result of this, we began to suppress our negative tendencies, and these negative tendencies then started to haunt our subconscious mind without our awareness. This creates a dark side of our character called the shadow. The shadow is created in our earliest years. It represents our repressed desires, traits, and tendencies. It contains those aspects of us that we think are considered unacceptable, and it has a thickness to it, which depends on how deep the level of repression was. The shadow lies buried deep within, but it becomes disturbed and active in moments of stress, or when deep wounds and insecurities are triggered. Most people are afraid to show their shadow sides to the world, and that makes sense because the world is too quick to judge. And if our behavior is unacceptable, we might suffer socially and even